And thank you for staying. I know it's Friday afternoon. It's 3 o'clock, and I'm one of the last speakers today, so really, really thank you for staying. And today, I'd like to share a little bit about enterprise training in the Metaverse and how to get started. This is everything you're going to see here today and hear me talk about is based on my experience over the last year. Really diving into working with enterprise. So I've got some pretty heavy-duty slides, and my mission is to share my education with everybody. So feel free to take as many screenshots and take this information back to your own companies to help integrate and use the information I share with you. So again, my name is Julie Smithson. I'm the co-founder of MetaVRse. We started our company a couple of years ago. We have a 3D game engine for the web. I won't go too much into my product because I want to share what experience I've had over the last year working with our enterprise clients using our product to create enterprise training. I'm also, just a few other things, a co-producer of XR Collaboration, also XR Women, and we've got some XR women in the house, and a WebXR Summit Series and co-host, and a member of iLearn Educators in VR and VRARA. So very heavily involved in the community. I wanted to take this brief moment and just give everybody my input into what the Metaverse is, since my company is called MetaVRse. I believe the Metaverse is about being present in the Metaverse space, in the virtual world, in the immersive space, and using communication, collaboration, commerce, and culture to come together. And really, the Metaverse is a place for everyone. So I want to talk about our journey into this transformation and where we are today. So let's talk about 2019, where we were all sitting here, not here, but in disbelief. Enterprise was sitting there not believing anything about this technology or how it was going to be integrated. And then 2020 came in, and everybody was in shock, right? We locked everybody down. 2021 was about learning about the technology and what to do with it. Now, 2022, let's get started. Everybody knows that they have to use this technology. How do you go from here? So the challenges in the workforce today after the pandemic hit, you've got remote work and how do companies manage this type of work and production for their companies, the technical capabilities. Not everybody's on the up and up of immersive technologies, so everybody's starting from scratch. We've got accelerated timelines, changes in processes and practicalities. The speed to hire and upskill is a big challenge, as well as integrations and connectivity. All of a sudden people are at home or, they're in different areas. There's different things going on, but accessibility and accessibility to the technology, as well as having limited access to the technology, is also a problem. So the business impact is that manufacturing, marketing, training, entertainment, education, and commerce are all, and I crossed it off, not going to start changing. They are changing, and they are changing exponentially. So it's time to use 3D in training. It's time to immerse training into the processes of teaching people how to use products, machines, processes, all sorts of things. And using 3D simulates the real thing. We live in a 3D world. Why do we not teach that? And that's kind of the big conversation now of convincing enterprise this is the way. It invites interactivity, gamification, and rewards, and builds spatial awareness. And I'm sure you see the QR code there. That leads you to the ultrasound experience that we have that you can try for yourself. So, results of immersive training, you can increase the retention levels and recall information and memory, improving your decision-making skills, and then going just a little bit into the savings of travel costs and time to travel costs. Those things were already realized as soon as everybody got locked down. So that was kind of the kickoff of training, I think, is just understanding, how the travel and how much money it takes to, send employees across country into travel programs. And this is a big wake-up call for enterprise today. So, okay, enterprise is convinced it's time to transform learning. They've got a budget, a team to support the next steps. Now the next steps is the path to delivery. So I'm going to talk about some Ds, path to delivery. So we're going to talk about discovery, design, developing, deploying, and then debriefing. And I know it's a lot here. I'll go through them really quickly. All of these slides here are, again, helping enterprises to come up with the stages of production and considerations when they're building things out. So what are you building? Well, you need a purpose and a mission. You need to have ROX and ROI defined. ROX is return on experience, and ROI, return on investment, obviously. What is your deployment method? And is it mobile, or is it VR? Is it AR? Is it just 3D on desktop? Understanding the deployment method right from the beginning is really important, because that'll set the stage of your storyboard as well as the implementation that takes place over the time period of development. Ethical design, I won't go too much into that, but obviously that's a huge consideration when you're starting to deal with interactivity and a new way of giving instructions to those users. One of the things that we used in our productions is using a three-pronged approach so that it helps the user from an observation perspective, an interactive level, and then the testing of the knowledge. And it can be perceived as observe, practice, and test. Something that gives the user three ways of looking or interacting with the machine itself or the process itself, and helping them become, basically learn about the machine and the processes, et cetera. Taking a look at your innovation team. This is a big one that enterprises are not set up for. They may have a marketing team, they have a technical team, but they don't have the team that's in the middle that understands the immersive direction that needs to take place when you're creating these experiences. So taking a hard look at who is in your organization already, how do you upskill them, how do you pull them together and have them starting to work on a concept of spatial design and awareness that nobody has ever known before. Integrations and hosting, huge conversation. How do you bring that learning management system in? How do you bring in the main company CRM system into play when you're starting to build out these experiences? So integrations and hosting are huge pieces of how to set it up right from the beginning. 3D assets, and I was sitting here with the previous panel, and they also said the same thing. Start with your 3D assets and start working on those, because to optimize and put them into the experience, that takes time. So while you're trying to figure out your storyboard, while you're trying to figure out some of these other things in the actual process of development, get working on your 3D assets and figuring out, if you don't have them already, you need to figure out how to build them if you're using photogrammetry or CAD models and that sort of thing. Understanding how you're going to deploy them, coming back to deployment, and making sure that those assets are going to be optimized for the solution that you're looking for. Training and beyond. How do you train your team, and how do you keep training them? Because we all know that every day is a new day. Innovation is constantly changing, and it's very agile. So how do you set your team up for success and pull a team together to be able to support the development moving forward? Knowledge testing. This is where how the machine or the 3D model behaves when you're asking the user questions and they start to interact with it. There's a whole puzzle piece behind this that's actually quite interesting that we've been working on for our clients, but it's really setting the stage for any type of gamification component within the experience itself. The behavior of the machines don't respond to multiple choice, right? Because you have to have an actual hard piece of data that's correct, and multiple choice just doesn't cut it. So, what do those questions look like, and what is the behavior of the machine when the user interacts with it? And then, of course, data collection. That's the other piece that we can go on and on into privacy and data collection. Next is design. So this opens up a whole new world. And I think just taking that step back from enterprise, some of us have conversations with our clients and they're ready to jump on the highway and go straight, 120 on the highway. Let's go right to mixed reality. Slowing them down and getting them to go through this process of design really takes them back. And I think there's a lot of considerations that need to be put into play from their perspective when you start asking these questions. What about world building and creating that environment for this experience to take place? The 3D brand question is an interesting one, and this goes right from training to marketing to all of the industries in between. Companies haven't considered what their brand is like in 3D. And, for however long, we've all used 2D and linear, very linear ways of recognizing brands. And now all of a sudden you're actually using a space where you have a 360 degrees of design to take care of. So those considerations are all things done in this phase of the development. Putting together that user journey is obviously really important as a user perspective, right from the beginning to the end. What does that look like? What are those interactions? What are the features that they're going to have access to? And also making sure there's no barriers there to understanding what the user has to do and how the user has to interact with the experience itself. Obviously, the features and abilities of the experience are huge. The avatar permissions, that's a whole new conversation now about avatars being used in these experiences and what those permissions are that the enterprise allows them to have and the information that they have access to. Hardware considerations, right? If you're having VR or mixed reality, what is the setup that's going to be required in the experience that's going to lend itself to its best performance? I spoke a bit about integrations. This is where you start to look at how those integrations are going to play a part in the actual experience itself, especially when it comes to learning management systems where what the user is doing with that 3D model and how they understand it are being measured on the other side. Again, ethical design, making sure that you're considering everyone, as well as accessibility, knowledge testing, data collection, and then employee communication. And this piece I put right on the end of this one because I think it's really important that you communicate with your employees how training is going to change, because it is. The processes are going to change, the way that they think, the way that the information is collected and then reported back. So it's really important that the employees understand how this transformation is going to affect their jobs and the way that they're going to communicate with others within the company as well. When you start to develop these experiences, there's other things to consider as well. CAD optimization. We talked a little bit about preparing your assets. Well, now it's time to put it into that game engine to have it deployed. So optimizing those assets for the best performance possible. Building out the animations that those machines do. Maybe some don't, but a lot of machines have some kind of movement that happens to them, whether it's a motor or a track that's taking place. There's a lot of components that you can add animations to, and this is where you start to build those in. Again, avatar permissions, the connections, the API integrations, inclusive design, coming up with your quiz rules, and then the UX and UI. The last one I want to talk about quickly, I'm going to sidetrack here to step guides. This is an interesting piece that over the last year we have seen a huge challenge in enterprise. And it's because we just don't understand spatial design and we don't have that awareness about us. So when you take 2D instructions and put them into 3D, you really have to think differently. And this, in my world of producing, is a huge challenge right now because and I did this for an example, if you had to change a fuse box, maybe the instructions would have 2 instructions. Open the back panel and replace the machine with the 20 amp fuse. That's what it would say in the instruction manual. When you implement that same instruction into a 3D model with animations and things that are happening, you have to actually build your experience with logic in mind. So before it was open the back panel and replace the fuse. When you actually start to make the steps to replace that fuse, there's a lot more things to take into consideration. Take off the back panel. Well, in real life, if that panel you need a screwdriver and 5 screws to unlock that panel, you have to actually put that into the step, because as a user, you're not just taking it right off, you have to actually take that screwdriver, pull those screws out. Replacing that fuse and how they access it, all of a sudden that 2-step 2D process is now 5 steps. Each step has an animation, and that animation triggers what that user is supposed to do. So taking 2D instructions into 3D is now a little bit more complicated than it ever was before. And this is something that a lot of education departments within enterprise are challenged with right now, because the educators never went to school for anything like this before. And taking this technology and applying it to instructions, it's a brand new way of thinking right away. So, part of preparing for the development is taking a look at those instructions and starting with that step guide. Just taking those instructions and thinking about them completely different. It's a very lengthy process. It's a little bit arduous because it's something we just don't know. So, setting your education teams and your training teams up for this type of understanding of spatial awareness will help that transformational process. Deployment. So again, now you're going to deploy this experience, whether you integrate it with an LMS or inventory systems, those types of things. However you start to enter those, get that live, that's something that should be tested and of course, research ahead of time if it's even going to work. And when you deploy, you've got your mobile headsets, or maybe it's QR codes, or just basically setting the users up with the right tools so that they can experience the training without the stress of barriers and access to the information. Assigning the devices to the team, having a sanitization plan if you've got headsets. Also considering updates and the upkeep of these experiences. Everybody knows that once you've deployed something, you have to maintain that. So what is that maintenance plan in the company, and who's going to take care of that? Being able to adjust the processes of how you train people is also a huge consideration that teams need to be ready for as well. And then what's the support with the deployment? Debriefing. Okay, so now you've deployed your experience, now you need to debrief it. And this is where the project just doesn't stop there. It'll evolve from there. You'll probably add another software, maybe you add another device, maybe a different way. Maybe the instructions that we did in the step guide are not clear enough. So being able to support the audit that's coming in from these experiences, listening to the employees' feedback and where their challenges are, that's super important, because if it's not working for the employees, they're definitely not going to be learning what you're trying to teach them. Building out the next statement of work from the audit is obviously, part 2, which there's probably got to be another budget. But as time evolves, you're going to start to say, oh, we want to do this now, or we want to add this in the scene, or we want to do this. So really understanding what that next phase is so that the experiences can keep evolving, growing, and of course, making a bigger impact into the company. So enterprise business decisions, the business line. Here's some tricks. The same models used for training can be repurposed for marketing, so saving the company money. The training departments also initiate learning, immersive learning for the entire company. And the business line needs to work with that education training department to leverage this, because everybody in the company needs to understand this new spatial awareness and design to lift the entire company up. And including remote immersive learning immediately decreases the cost of travel and time to travel already. So you're building efficiencies in your company without even starting that, because we started to do that a couple of years ago with the pandemic. So already seeing those costs happening as soon as you start to integrate immersive learning into your program, that's really important. taking, say, a 9-day business training course for a particular machine or system, and building a hybrid model is actually really smart at this point, and creating base knowledge of the machine itself with an immersive experience, but then having the team go live into the actual warehouse or the training center to be able to learn the machine, breaking that up and giving the user different ways of learning different pieces of that training process will accelerate and save you costs. So just to wrap up, skilling your team. This is really important as you start to figure out who in the company is going to be taking care of these experiences and supporting both the training teams, and then of course it overlaps into the other departments, but exposing the training team to other experiences that are out there in the industry will help them understand and learn how to implement this new way of giving instructions. Teaching our team about 3D components, files, formats, everything about meshes, materials, textures. These are all the things that we've never had to deal with before, and understanding the process of how to take a 3D model and put it into an experience. Teaching the team that will only help the production and accelerate that production of learning for the entire company. So, my last slide, train with purpose and consideration. Consider the ease of entry into these experiences. Figure out what the multi-purpose is around these experiences that you can bring into the rest of the organization. Asking the employees about their consideration of how do they feel about these experiences? What can we do better? Keeping that open line of communication will, break down that fear of them losing jobs or being too stressful. Figuring out your maintenance program and the updates, that's super important, just to make sure that the experience doesn't die off in a way because you're doing a major transition for your company. And figuring out how to evolve and grow, and establishing agility within your organization to be able to embrace the innovation and apply it to the systems that you have and evolve from there. So, thank you very much. I hope I provided, thank you. I hope I provided value. It's been truly a great personal experience to spend time with an enterprise company and learning all of these things that, I believe is the foundation of how we enter into this accelerated, world of innovation. And hopefully some of these principles you can take back to your own companies and apply them. But thank you very much, and thanks very much to AWE for hosting this week. I feel like, woo, we had a great week, and thanks everybody for coming. Thank you. And I can take any questions if anybody has any. I think we have and there's mics on the side if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, thanks. That was a great overview, and you did a nice job of highlighting the complexity that's not obvious when you first look at this. Can you speak a little bit about the budgets and what you see clients willing to pay and how you balance that? Because we have looked at this space a bunch of times, and between the asset creation and all of the interaction creation and so on, this was probably 2 years ago was the last time we looked at this seriously, and for the type of client we normally work with, it just was not economically feasible. So
yeah, I think that enterprise, they all have their own agendas, and there's so many layers of approvals, there's so many layers of people that have to be involved in these things. From my experience, we are seeing movement happening. They know they have to do this. In our case, it was about finding and working with an enterprise company who saw us as a partner. Enterprise companies do not have the innovation teams or the knowledge base that we as our industry bring to them. And it's really in the best interest of enterprise to become partners with an innovation company to help them stay on top of what's new, so it doesn't get trapped in that layer of politics within enterprise. Speaking of budgets, I believe, that's why this year, and that's why I laid out the journey of where we've been the last couple of years. The budgets are there now, and it's enterprise trying to find their partners. If you're like ourselves, an innovation company, sharing the fact that you can become a partner with the enterprise and not just a one-time deal is going to be really important to them, because you're integrating into their systems. So they're opening their gates to allow you into their systems. They need to feel comfortable with that relationship, and it really does take time. As far as budgets go, from an enterprise level, we saw definitely, just under $5 million into a particular program that they were looking at from our side, and costing that out. Just remember that time is money, and every single animation that you see in these experiences, and it takes time to build those configurations. So as you're building these types of things, make sure you value the time that it takes to build them and to reevaluate them. There's definitely some challenges in working with enterprise. Once that budget is set, it's locked in, and additional scope can't be done. And that, as you know, is really hard for our industry to apply that, because Microsoft decided to do an update, this morning, and now we have to spend hours and hours of updating your app. I don't have a safety net for that one yet, if anybody knows how to deal with that one. But I think, when you're originally quoting, you need to think about these things in the back end of having that buffer amount for the default of additional scope. Hopefully I answered your question. Anybody else? If not, it's the end of AWE. Time for a drink. Have a good weekend, everyone. Travel home safe.